Over the last few days, weeks, and months, these companies have fired a combined 60,265 people. Well, one of these firings in particular has captured a lot of attention: Twitter. When Musk took over Twitter and immediately fired half of the company's workforce, the business world sat up and listened. However, while Twitter might have garnered the most attention, it only actually represents 6% of the layoffs I mentioned at the start of this video. Ride-hailing app Lyft fired 700 people, while Uber got rid of 3,700. Online payments giant Stripe let 1,100 people go. Crypto exchange Coinbase cut 1,100 jobs. E-commerce giant Shopify laid off about 1,000 people. Netflix fired 450, Booking.com scrapped 4,375 roles, Microsoft let an estimated 1,000 people go, Mum's favorite Groupon fired 2,800, Snapchat's owners Snap cut more than 1,000 people, while TikTok's owners ByteDance got rid of 3,600 positions. Investment platform Robinhood fired 31% of their staff over 2 firing rounds, while fintech Chime let 160 people go. Airbnb got rid of 1,900 people, delivery firm Getir fired 4,480, Klarna fired 700, Peloton scrapped 3,300 roles, Tesla fired an estimated 3,500 people, or 10% of their salaried workforce. Amazon are expected to cut a huge 10,000 people, but the biggest of all is Meta, where Mark Zuckerberg just let 11,000 people go, or 11% of their total workforce. And that's not all either. According to data aggregator layoffs.fyi, more than 1,118 people working in big tech have been fired in 2022 alone. And those are just the publicly disclosed numbers. There's likely other firings that we just don't know about. There's also companies like Apple and Google who haven't yet made any cuts, but who have enacted major hiring freezes. So what the fuck is going on? Wasn't big tech meant to be the savior of us all? Why are these companies suddenly letting their employees go faster than Leonardo DiCaprio ditches his girlfriend when she reaches 25? Well, let's find out. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to TLDR Business yet, I'd really appreciate your support. We're rocketing towards 100,000 subscribers, and a silver play button would be a great Christmas gift for me and obviously the whole team. So, if you want to find out why so many people are being fired in the tech industry, there's one place to look for excuses: the letters and memos that are published by these companies and their leaders. Now, in each of these, we not only hear varying levels of compassion, but we also find their explanations for the firings. Now, the logic presented in these letters ought to be taken with a pinch of salt. These CEOs have all kinds of incentives other than the truth, but it is worth examining the reasons they present, including the impending recession, overzealous hiring, the end of the pandemic, and not culling the pack sooner. The least flashy, but probably most impactful reason is the current economic climate, and more specifically, interest rate rises and projected changes in consumer spending. Now, as you probably know, central banks around the world have been raising interest rates in order to get a handle on the economy. We don't have time to explain the economic theory here, but essentially, increased interest rates encourage people to save more and make borrowing more expensive. Now, this almost immediately makes easy capital a thing of the past, as startups can no longer rely as heavily on VCs, who are currently becoming a lot less generous with their investments. It's not just investors who are expected to cut back, though. So are households, and by extension, advertisers. For some companies, a fall in household spending is directly impactful. You're less likely to order food or take taxis if you have less disposable income. For other companies, though, the maths is a little less direct, but no less impactful. That's because advertisers generally spend less money on advertising during recessionary times, as it's widely seen as a more optional form of spending, which is relatively easy to cut out when consumers begin spending less. No matter how you cut it then, these businesses are going to be worried that there's going to be less surplus capital floating around very soon. And if investors and consumers don't have as much money to keep pumping into tech, then their ability to continue scaling as fast as they are suddenly ends. This means that without tankers of VC money, they're going to have to start getting a lot more careful with their cash, something that big tech hasn't done in a while now. While the impending recession might be the most obvious cause, overhiring is maybe the most commonly lamented in CEO memos. In fact, Twitter's founder and former CEO Jack Dorsey put it incredibly bluntly, saying that he realized many people were angry with him. "I own the responsibility for why everyone is in this situation. I grew the company size too quickly. I apologize for that." So why were these companies employing too many people? Well, this isn't an issue unique to big tech. A lot of companies periodically find themselves feeling a bit bloated. And with huge quantities of cash flowing into the tech sector, some argue that big tech rather overindulged. Eric Racklin, co-founder of AI firm Body Labs, which is now owned by Amazon, explained to the New York Times how there's real pressure on businesses to spend VC money quickly and not necessarily wisely. Rather than seriously calculating need, leaders can be tempted to just spend big on payroll in order to make the current round of investment feel warranted and the next round look even more necessary. And it's not just from the top either. Those within big tech regularly remark that there's a pressure on middle managers to increase the number of people that they're managing. That's because increasing direct reports not only further justifies their position and protects them in times like these, but also makes their promotion more likely. And it's not just these factors either. One specific issue cited by a number of CEOs is over-optimism about life after the pandemic. Stripe CEO Patrick Collinson and Meta's supreme leader Mark Zuckerberg both struck similar tones in their official messaging. Stripe said that the company had overemployed because they were much too optimistic about the internet economy's near-term growth in 2022 and 2023, while Zuckerberg said that many people predicted this would be a permanent acceleration that would continue even after the pandemic ended. "I got this wrong, and I take responsibility for that." Now, I don't need to remind you that during the pandemic, essentially everyone's lives were upended. Work situations and attitudes shifted quickly, and people had to adjust to new ways of communication across the board. And that really helped a number of big tech companies. The social networks found people desperate to continue communicating, while businesses who offered alternatives to in-person dining, exercise, and entertainment all benefited from new audiences who were stuck at home. Now, obviously, there was always going to be some sort of reset once doors reopened, but the conventional wisdom was that there had been a major sea change, and that people had permanently shifted towards these new attitudes. Now, to some extent, they were right. Remote working and communication over online channels have continued to be popular, so some conveniences have remained bedded in. However, this shift is less absolute than many of these companies had planned for. As Zuckerberg himself acknowledged, businesses like Meta expected this once-in-a-generation crisis to change the world in their favor forever, hence them hiring a ton more people to meet this new workload. Businesses across the board then became overly confident that this pandemic-led boom would continue forever. However, as people began to go outside again and VCs became a little more fussy with their money, CEOs are beginning to wonder what sort of rose-tinted glasses they'd been wearing and why they hadn't cut back sooner. Besides mass layoffs like the ones we're seeing right now, cutting back the bloat looks less and less appealing the more a company scales. For one, the bigger a company gets, the more likely they are to get landed with a wrongful termination lawsuit from a spurned former employee, which could put them off getting rid of them in the first place. For another, the incentives often don't line up for them to get rid of the right people. As I mentioned earlier, managers are often rewarded for growing their teams, so cutting back any underperformers often doesn't make much sense, especially when the company as a whole is big enough and rich enough that higher-ups aren't paying all that much attention. So much so that one former Google recruiter told Protocol that there was such an adversity to firing people that if a manager had a problem with a staff member, they'd be more likely to transfer them to another team than just attempt to get rid of them altogether, which even led to some suspicion among managers when internal transfers were proposed. In fact, some have even reported seeing difficult team members get preferentially promoted just to get them out of their manager's hair. So, those are the reasons given by CEOs and leaders for why they're forced to let large chunks of their company go. But what happens now? Can big tech recover? Or is it just medium tech now? The big hope for the technology and business worlds is that all of this will lead to fresh innovation and thinking. Previous crises, like the dot-com bubble and 2008 recession, led businesses across the board to rethink their approach and led to the advent of new technologies and companies. Therefore, the hope is that with a bunch of smart people out of work, we could see fresh tech giants emerge. In fact, businesses like Day One Ventures are actively targeting recently fired staff. While that innovation is likely, it's also very probable that this isn't the end of the firings. We can expect to see other companies joining this list, and some already on it, making additional rounds of firings as conditions worsen yet further. As such, we can expect to see more of these letters soon and more personal suffering for the let go employees. That means more CEOs blaming inflationary pressures, interest rates, or the overzealous employment strategies of the pandemic era. They'll likely take some of the blame for this optimism before promising to support those being fired with career support, healthcare, and severance pay. They'll also remark how appreciative they are of the work the team has put in, and for those remaining in place, they'll reassert the power and importance of the company's vision. And don't worry, Team TLDR, this is just a cynical example. I'm not firing anyone. If you like this video though, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to be notified when we release more. And if you think you've already subscribed, then do me a favor and double check. TLDR has quite a few channels at this point, so it's possible you've subscribed to the other ones and not this one just yet.